Welcome back. Lots of cups of tea later. So, what have I been up to? Right, well, the chassis is all together, actually. I haven't got the front servo in yet, and obviously there's no electronics in here. But basically, the wheels are now all glued in, fixed in. Steering linkages are all done. All the nuts and bolts are on. Obviously, I've got these are temporary nuts and bolts on here. Sorry, the nuts on here. They're going to have nylox and everything on there, and everything will be greased up. But the chassis is rolling chassis, so that's good. And as you can see, I've been working on the top section. I've been working on the bodywork. The idea of this is this bolts. You can't really see here, but it kind of bolts onto the chassis so it can be removed and I can work on things at the same time. And I'm building up the rear section and the front section. Now the middle section is obviously where the turret goes. Out of all of it, that will probably that's the most complicated section of everything. And I'm waiting now on a big bearing that I need to put in here. Fortunately, I can't make that bearing. I did think about 3D printing it, but it just won't be strong enough. It doesn't matter what I print it in. So I'm waiting on the bearing to go in there, and then I will get the bearing and the servo and everything set in, and then the turret will be in the next part of the build. But basically what I'm doing at the moment is I did actually get asked a comment, how do you make these panels? How do you do all this? Well, it's really simple. Cardboard. So for example, this is the piece that's kind of underneath. We obviously need a drop piece now that comes onto here. So this will be, as you can see here, I've made up a cardboard template that is going to go on there. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut this out of metal. And once that's cut out of metal, this will be welded onto here, like that. And it will then start forming part of the side. And that's how I do these. These are just simply made up out of cardboard, put on, get my template, cut it in metal, and weld it on. And welding's interesting. I've moved recently to gasless welding. I wanted to experiment a little bit with gasless welding. You know, looking at its strengths and all the kind of the pros and cons between that and using gas. And yeah, there are some negatives. I mean, the negatives, first of all, it's messy. There's no question. Basically, gasless welding with a MIG is the same as stick welding. It's the same. So it's splatty. So there's a lot of cleaning up to do afterwards. Can be a bit of a pain, you know, because it basically gets everywhere. So you've got to prepare where you work is really, really important. You don't want to leave things lying around that are going to get splats all over them. It's certainly as strong, there's no question, and it's definitely hotter than the equivalent, running my equivalent gas. So I've had to turn the machine down quite a lot. The welds don't look as pretty, but then saying that, a lot of this is spot welded. It's very unlikely I'm going to do long beads. However, saying that, I've just done one along here. These were two pieces of quite thin metal that I had to join together, and I had to get this kind of line here. So I had to basically tack weld it and then put a bead in all the way down. Now, that would have taken not half the time if I did it probably with gas. And you still get, you kind of probably can't quite see, but along the front here, there are a few holes where it not blows through, but I can't. It seems to be a characteristic of that kind of stick welding. Obviously, with stick welding you can't, or with gasless you can't go back over the weld. So yeah, but you know, this is an experiment. This is something new. I want to see how it goes. You know, paying for the cylinder rental and for the gas. You know, I've been doing this for years, and you know, it gets expensive. And you know, I wanted to see whether or not I could go gasless with steel. So then, obviously, later I can go. Obviously, when I'm doing the aluminium, I've got to use the argon with the TIG. But this is, you know, anyway. So yes, so that's an interesting sort of byproduct of this. This takes longer than it did before. what else? As I said, I'm making up templates. These templates, I'm going to cut them. That's my next thing I'm doing. Get these templates cut in metal, and then get them welded on. There is a long way to go, and I've got to be thinking about how things fit together. So, for example, the top. If I'll come round here, the top that's going to fit on here. I've got to think about how that top's going to attach. Now, the idea is that the top on here and the top on here are going to be removable, so I can get to all the internals in here, and I can also get to the electronics, which are going to be in here. Now, you have to think that through about, I have to weld nuts and bolts, and I have to weld fixings in that, so we can unscrew things, and I'll kind of explain it as I go along, and I'll show you as I go along. It makes it a lot easier than just waving my arms in the air and trying to explain it like that. But yeah, so this phase now is a matter of just cutting the panels, welding the panels on, and I will then start to build up the superstructure. As I said, I'm not working on the turret at the moment. Turret is coming later because it is quite complicated. Oh yeah, one comment I did have is, how do you fix... So, for example, you have to excuse me sniffing. It's got really cold here at the moment. I actually didn't do my weather forecast, did I? It's got really cold here again now, and I need to go and find my hat and put my hat on because I'm sniffing away here. Anyway, joining two pieces of metal together, sometimes, and the metal is only very, very thin, if you want to join things at angles like this, the best way to do it is literally create the structure, tape it together, and just tack, 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 weld it, and then just try to get the bead weld to run along without getting too much distortion in the metal that you're using. It works, it's strong, there's no question about that, and it will last for years. Obviously, I have a massive advantage here in that this was all going to be finished in textured paint, so any discrepancies in my welding, you're just not going to see it anyway, because it's going to be covered in that kind of textured paint that I'm going to put onto this one. Anyway, back to a few more cups of tea, cutting a few more panels, welding a few more bits on, and I would imagine in a couple of weeks' time I will have a superstructure finished. So, see you then. Bit more progress on the darner. I'm getting a bit of shape to things now, and this is kind of, if you like, the sculpting stage. This is where obviously I'm cutting the panels out and I'm kind of working everything in and welding it all together. I got a brilliant comment and I have to address it. Somebody asked me, what CNC machine do I use to cut out all the metal, all the panels? And it gave me a little bit of a chuckle, to be perfectly honest. I would love a CNC machine to cut out all the panels. It would make life so much easier. Perhaps, I don't know. What I do, or if you like, my CNC machine, is this. My trusty Nakita angle grinder. Yes, before you say there's no guard on it, yes, I know that. I always get whinged at by Mrs. Breaker anyway, but this is what I use to cut everything. All the metal gets cut with this, so this is my CNC machine. The beauty of working with that is that I can basically cut the panels out, tack weld them in, and then bead weld where I need to, put the bead along and to get a nice finish. But the beauty is I can then sculpt with the angle grinder. So it's much more organic, it's much more fun doing that kind of working that way, or at least I like working that way anyway. So yeah, I mean, I actually do have a CNC machine. We bought one many years ago. And it's great. Everything kind of works, apart from the fact that it doesn't work. Well, it kind of works and it doesn't work. It's a software issue. I've got, I think the software is called Mac 3, and I really don't understand how to use it because it's all numbers based, and I'm not a numbers person. But the machine itself is perfect. So anybody out there that wants to come and set a CNC machine up for me, feel free to comment below. Anyway, oh yeah, one other comment I did get, which was brilliant actually. Was about these, and in fact I had a few comments about these, and somebody said, because not so much on the front, obviously this is not on the chassis at the moment, not so much on the front but on the rear, what if you get a flat tyre? How are you going to change the tyre if you've glued the wheel to the axle. Well, I haven't glued the wheel to the axle. What I've actually done on the rear is basically the 3D printed piece that goes through, do you remember, is glued into this. So it's bonded into this, but that has no impact on the tyre at all. Now, the mountain board wheels that I used were a little bit better than these in that they were split rims. So I can just basically pull the two parts aside, pull them apart, change the tyre. This one is the same though in the fact that all I got to do is let the air out, the tyre gets really loose, put a lever underneath it and lever the tyre off and change the tube. So it actually makes no difference. They're pneumatic tyres. Also, the chance of actually getting a puncture on these is going to be incredibly remote, simply because, you know, first of all, they're never going to be pumped up that high. But yeah, you know. The other problem I'm having is I've painted the back of these ones, but as you can see, it hasn't really worked that well. It's an acrylic paint, and this is a nylon material. You can see here, look, it's just all coming off. It's all pulling off the acrylic paint. Bit of a pain, but I'm going to have to repaint all that. I need something that is going to bond to this nylon better than that black acrylic paint. And probably have to use some sort of primer on there to key into it. How I'm going to get all that out, I don't know. But anyway, that's another problem for another day. So yeah, so that, you know, answers a couple of questions that I've had about this. As you can see, things are progressing nicely. We've got the front on now. Light section's all cut. Lower section here all put in. So I've got a nice shape coming around. Got to get the front piece put on. Top going on, that's going to be the fun challenge, because obviously I've got to create beads that go along, and then it's welding from inside. So a bit more problematic, but not impossible. So yeah, there we have it. Progress on the Dana.